Hey everybody, and thanks for tuning in. My name is Paul Robertson. I'm an attorney here in Orlando, Florida. And the question we're answering this week is, what type of business structure should you use when starting your new company? We're going to be covering LLCs, sole proprietorships, and corporations. So stay tuned, and thanks for tuning in. So the question we're going to be answering today is probably the question that I'm most often asked by entrepreneurs. They call me and they say, Paul, I'm starting a new company and I don't know if I should set this company up, what type of business structure I should use. I don't know if I should just go as a sole proprietor. Should I start an LLC, a corporation? What do you think? And my answer is almost always the same. It depends on what you need because different structures are good for different businesses. But today we're going to cover the most commonly used structures that I see. And that's going to be the sole proprietorship, the LLC, and the C-corp. Now, the S-corp is another popular structure that's often used, but we're going to cover that in a different video. Now, first, we're going to talk about a sole proprietorship. Now, what a sole proprietorship is it's essentially a business unit that is connected with the owner of the business. Now, you have one person who's operating a business, they haven't filed anything with the state, and they're out doing business as an individual. That's more than likely a sole proprietorship. Now, there's no legal filing requirements associated with the sole proprietorship. You have no annual filing requirements to keep it active, but because of that, the sole proprietorship doesn't give you any type of limited liability protection as an entity. Second, you gotta remember that with a sole proprietorship, there's no taxes paid by the entity. All of the taxes that are paid are directly connected to the owner of the entity and they go straight directly onto his tax return. Now, not only is a sole proprietorship the easiest structure to create, it's also the easiest to maintain. With a sole proprietorship, there's no annual filing requirements that you have to do in order to make sure that that entity is up and running on an annual basis. Now, the biggest pro with a sole proprietorship is, well, it's the easiest to create and it's the easiest to maintain. But the biggest drawback with it is there's no limited liability protection. So because there's no limited liability protection, in the event you're sued, your personal assets could be on the line for any judgment against you. So that's one of the biggest drawbacks associated with the sole proprietorship. Next, we're going to talk about the LLC, the limited liability company. Now, this is probably the most often used business structure that I see. Now, to create an LLC, all you have to do is file your articles of incorporation with the state. Once you've done that, what you want to do is make sure you go out, get yourself a great operating agreement, and that's the governing document for your LLC. Now, with an LLC, you get limited liability protection. So what that means is, in the event you're sued, the only thing that you have at risk is the money that you've invested into the company itself. Now, with an LLC, it doesn't pay taxes by itself as an entity. But what happens is it has pass-through taxation. So with pass-through taxation, all of the taxes that are due are going to be put directly on the business owner's tax returns. Now, in order to maintain your LLC, you have to make sure that annually you file your annual report with your state in order to keep it active. So the biggest pros with an LLC is, first, you have your limited liability protection, which protects your personal assets from being put into a lawsuit. But the biggest drawback with the LLC is you probably have to remember every year to file your annual report. In the event you don't file that annual report, your LLC becomes inactive with the state. Now, next, we're going to talk about C-corps. Now, C-corps, just like LLCs, the entity and the ownership are two separate things. In order to start a C-corp in your state, first you got to file your articles of incorporation with your state. Next thing I always recommend people to do is make sure you get your bylaws completed. You need to have your bylaws completed. You also need to have a board of directors in order to maintain a valid C corporation. Now, with a C corp, you do get limited liability protection. But instead of members being the owners, you have separate shareholders who each have their own ownership stake in a C corp. Unlike an LLC, a C corp as an entity has its own tax bill. So if you are the owner of a C corp, every year you have to make sure you file your taxes for your entity, and those taxes are going to be paid at the corporate tax rate. Now, individuals who have salaries from the C corp, they also have to pay taxes. So with a C corp, yes, what you get is what we call double taxation, where the entity has to pay taxes as well as the individual receiving a salary also has to pay taxes on the money he receives in the C-corp. So the biggest pros I would say that you get with a C-corp, obviously the limited liability protection, but another one is that with a C-corp, you can easily sell the shares that you own between other members or new people based on what your bylaws say. Now, out of the three that we've talked about, the C-corp has the most requirements in order to keep it active. Now, you have to file your annual report, you have to have annual meetings and keep minutes. You also have to have meetings that include your board of directors. So because of that, the C-corp is probably the most complex of all the organizations that you have to keep active. So go ahead and check out this chart I've made. It just gives you some pros and cons based off of the three structures we've discussed and which ones are the best for different situations. The biggest cons that you get with a C-corp is the annual requirements can be a lot. And for people who are running their first time business, if it's not necessary that you get a C-corp, saying that you don't have potentially a lot of owners who are going to be a part of that company, then sometimes the LLC is the better structure to use because it's easier to maintain and it also still gives you that limited liability protection. Most of all, what I like to tell people is with a C-corp, an LLC, and a sole proprietorship, I usually don't recommend anyone do business as a sole proprietor. First, because you don't get that limited liability protection. Generally, what I recommend people who are one-person or two-person businesses is get an LLC. You can have partnership shares structured out through your operating agreement. You get the limited liability protection. But in order to keep that entity open, all you have to do is file your annual report. If not, if you have a huge number of people who are going to be owners of the business, people who are going to be possibly coming and going as their ownership changes in value, then probably you want to go with a C-corp. Now, with the double taxation, there are ways that you can make that beneficial to you as an owner based on the amount of salary you're going to take and the distributions you get at the end. We'll cover that in a different video, but like I said, the type of structure you use as a business is going to be based on what you're doing as a business, also the number of shareholders or owners you're going to have. These are all factors that you're going to need to take into consideration when determining which structure you want to use. Hey, I want to thank you for tuning in. I'm Paul Robertson, and thanks for checking out this video. If you liked what you saw, go ahead and hit the like button. Also, make sure you subscribe and share. I want to thank you for checking us out. Feel free to reach out to me via email if you have any questions, and check out my social medias. I want to thank you once again for your time. I'm Paul Robertson, and I'm signing out.